Our world feels stable, concrete, solid. But there are times when reality thins, times when people step across an invisible line and find themselves somewhere else, somewhere wrong. These stories are not fiction, but real accounts told by those who claim they've crossed over into parallel worlds and sometimes found their way back. Story 1. It began with a simple elevator ride. In September of 1956, the magazine Fate published the account of a young woman named Miriam who described an experience from her past that haunted her for decades. She said that in the fall of 1934, she was riding in an elevator with her fiancé and several others. The elevator came to a sudden halt on one of the floors. Miriam stepped out and instantly knew something was wrong. Instead of a hotel hallway or a lobby, she stood inside a strange, cavernous train station. Crowds of people moved around her, but their clothing didn't match her own era. Their style was foreign skirts, jackets, and hats she had never seen before, as if taken from some other time or some other place. Confused, Miriam approached a young man working at a kiosk. She asked him where she was, desperate for some explanation. But he didn't look at her. He didn't hear her. He didn't seem to notice her at all, as if she were invisible, existing slightly out of sync with his world. Then, across the railway platform, she noticed a little boy staring directly at her. His eyes were wide, with the same fear she felt. When Miriam crossed over and spoke to him, he whispered something that chilled her to the bone. "You're in the wrong place, and there is no way out." The boy explained that he too had arrived there by accident. He had been playing tennis in Lincoln, Nebraska. He stepped into the locker room to change, and when he came back out, he found himself here in this impossible station. The two walked together for what felt like hours, wandering through this world that mirrored their own, yet felt distorted. Eventually, they reached a beach, where Miriam spotted her own sister enjoying the sun with friends. Relief surged through her. She screamed her sister's name, calling again and again, but her sister didn't hear her. No one did. Miriam's voice was swallowed by the strange air of that world. Moments later, she blinked and found herself back in the elevator, sitting in a chair at a music store, her fiancé staring at her, asking where she had gone when the elevator stalled. To him, no time had passed. To Miriam, it had felt like forever. Story 2. 1935. Frances, her husband, and their 4 children were traveling along St. Patrick's Trail in Missouri for a simple weekend trip, but what they saw on that drive changed their lives forever. As they passed through a valley, the landscape shifted into something unrecognizable. The air shimmered with an unnatural beauty. The fields were lush, almost glowing, and on the road, they saw groups of people, women with long skirts and delicate parasols, men in black hats herding sheep, villagers dressed in clothing from another century. It was like driving into a painting, a snapshot from the past. When they finally reached their destination, Frances asked locals about the people they'd seen, but no one knew what she was talking about. The locals insisted there were no villages, no flocks of sheep, nothing but empty countryside. Disturbed, the family drove back along the same road, but this time, the valley was silent, empty. The colors were gone. The land was dull and lifeless, as though the world they'd passed through had been erased or had never existed at all. Story 3. In 1962, Mr. Rue Balcom and his wife were driving toward Lake Tahoe, California. They knew the road well, having driven it many times before. But on this day, they spotted something unfamiliar, a restaurant just a few miles outside of Placerville. They decided to stop. Inside, they found a cozy, beautifully decorated place. The staff were warm and welcoming. The food was some of the best they'd ever tasted. They left full and happy, eager to return on their next trip. But when they drove the same road days later, the restaurant was gone, completely vanished. The lot where it had stood was empty. They searched and searched, convinced they must have taken a wrong turn, but they hadn't. The place simply no longer existed. To this day, the couple never found it again. On August 15, 1960, in Hallwood, Massachusetts, 6-year-old Kathy Kramer vanished. At 7:00 p.m., her father checked on her in her room. Everything was normal. Minutes later, she was gone. The search for Kathy was massive. Police, firefighters, volunteers, even the Coast Guard scoured the land. Air Force pilots flew overhead, while ground teams searched every inch of the neighborhood. Some began to suspect the father himself, believing no child could vanish so completely without help. But then, at 3 o'clock days later, Kathy's parents found her sound asleep in her bed, as if she had never left. When they asked her where she had been, Kathy only looked confused. She insisted she had been asleep in her room the entire time. To this day, no one knows where she went, or how she returned. Story 5. That same summer of 1960, in Ontario, Canada, a boy named Michael Hilferty disappeared for 5 nights. He was later discovered lying calmly beside a set of train tracks. But here's the strange part. Michael showed no signs of dehydration, fatigue, or hunger. His clothes were clean and dry, despite the fact that heavy dew had soaked the ground every night. When asked what happened, Michael claimed he had only been gone for a few hours. He had no memory of the missing days. It was as if time itself had skipped for him. Story 6. In January of 1961, in Fresno, California, a letter by Joseph Kurska described one of the most unsettling cases of all. A young girl named Carmen Chaney was walking when she was approached by a strange old woman dressed in clothing that seemed centuries out of date. The woman's presence was uncanny, her movements stiff and unnatural. Then, in front of more than 30 witnesses, the old woman simply vanished. One moment she was there, the next, she was gone. No trace, no explanation, as if she had accidentally stepped out of our reality and back into her own. These are just a few of the stories. Real people, from different places and times, who claimed to have slipped into worlds that weren't ours. Worlds that mirrored our own but carried something off, something alien. If they are true, it means that parallel dimensions are not just theoretical, they're all around us, separated by the thinnest of walls. And sometimes, without warning, those walls break. So the next time you ride an elevator, drive down an empty road, or find yourself staring into the woods at night, pay attention, because you never know when you might cross over and you may not come back.